Results change when you change your perspective. In the sun-drenched, palm-fringed landscapes of post-war Hawaii, a 9-year-old boy stands at a crossroads that will eventually redefine the financial consciousness of the entire world. He is not looking at maps or ledgers, but at two men who represent the fundamental schism in human ambition. One is his biological father, a man of staggering intellectual pedigree, a PhD holder and a high-ranking government official who believes that the path to security is paved with gold star grades and a prestigious resume. He is the archetypal poor dad, a brilliant mind trapped in the structural prison of the middle class, perpetually haunted by bills and the quiet desperation of a man who works for money but never understands it. The other is his best friend's father, a man who never finished the 8th grade but possesses a predatory, alchemical intuition for the movement of capital. He is the rich dad, the sovereign architect of his own destiny, who views the world not as a place to find a job, but as a vast ocean of assets waiting to be harnessed. This narrative is the visceral chronicle of a young boy's initiation into the secret language of the wealthy, a journey that begins with a simple, sensational realization: the poor and the middle class work for money, while the rich have money work for them. The story ignites when young Robert and his friend Mike, tired of being the poor kids in a school of the elite, ask Rich Dad to teach them how to make money. The initiation is not a lecture, but a psychological trial. Rich Dad puts them to work in one of his stores for a pittance, 10 cents an hour, forcing them to feel the raw, stinging friction of the rat race. The boy's biological father is outraged, demanding he ask for a raise or quit. But the rich dad is waiting for the boy to reach the breaking point of his own frustration. When Robert finally confronts him, the lesson is delivered with surgical precision. Rich Dad explains that most people spend their lives being pushed around by life, reacting to the twin emotions of fear and greed. Fear of not having money keeps them working at a job they often hate, and greed lures them into spending their hard-earned paychecks on fleeting pleasures and liabilities, creating a cycle of dependency that lasts until death. The sensation of this realization is like a veil being lifted. The boy learns that the rat race is not an external condition, but an internal psychological trap. By refusing to react to the fear and the greed, by working for free to clear the mind, the boys begin to see opportunities that those blinded by the need for a paycheck can never perceive. This segment of the journey teaches the law of emotional financial intelligence. It posits that wealth is not a matter of how much you earn, but how much control you have over the primal impulses that dictate your relationship with the coin. As the narrative flows deeper into the boy's education, we encounter the most significant and misunderstood distinction in the history of personal finance: the difference between an asset and a liability. To the world of the poor dad, a house is the greatest asset one can own, a symbol of stability and success. But the rich dad shatters this illusion with sensational clarity. He defines an asset as something that puts money into your pocket, and a liability as something that takes money out of your pocket. The poor dad's house is a liability because it demands taxes, insurance, and maintenance while yielding nothing in return. This is the archetype of the middle-class trap. People work harder, get raises, and immediately buy bigger houses and faster cars, thinking they are accumulating wealth when they are actually just increasing the weight of their chains. The narrative describes the cash flow of the ignorant, where income is immediately consumed by expenses and liabilities, leaving the individual a slave to the next payday. The psychological lesson is financial literacy. Without the ability to read a balance sheet, a man is a blind traveler in a forest of financial wolves. To grow rich, one must possess the discipline to ignore the social pressure of consumption and focus entirely on the asset column: real estate, stocks, bonds, and intellectual property, the silent engines that generate wealth independently of human labor. The narrative then explores the sovereignty of the corporation, a sensational revelation of how the rich protect their harvest from the tax man. The poor dad, like most of the world, believes in the morality of taxing the rich to help the poor. But the rich dad reveals the historical reality: taxes were originally designed to punish the wealthy, but the wealthy simply used their financial IQ to outsmart the system. They created corporations, legal entities that function as shields, A person who works a job is taxed before they even see their paycheck. They earn, they are taxed, and they live on what is left. But the rich use corporations to earn, spend as much as possible on business-related expenses, and are only taxed on what is left. This is the archetype of the corporate shield. It reveals that the game is rigged against those who play by the rules of the employee, and rigged in favor of those who understand the rules of the capitalist. The lesson learned is the power of legal knowledge. By mastering the 4 pillars of financial intelligence, accounting, investing, understanding markets, and the law, an individual moves from the role of a victim of the system to a master of the environment. It is a sensational call to psychological independence, urging the seeker to stop building the empires of others and start building a fortress for themselves. The story intensifies as Robert grows into adulthood. Navigating the Colosseum of risk, he observes that in the real world, it is not necessarily the smart who get ahead, but the bold. He encounters the fear of losing, a paralyzing emotion that keeps most people tethered to safety and job security. The poor dad fears losing his pension, the rich dad fears losing his mind to the comfort of the status quo. The narrative describes the sensation of the professional gambler, the investor who views failure not as a tragedy, but as a lesson. Rich Dad teaches that winning means being unafraid to lose. Most people fail because they play so safely that they never give themselves a chance to win. They treat their money like a shield when they should treat it like a seed. This segment analyzes the archetype of the courageous investor. It teaches that financial success requires the internal fortitude to handle the volatility of the market and the intellectual agility to find the deal of a lifetime hidden beneath the debris of a crisis. Wealth is not found in a bank vault, it is found in the mind's ability to turn a problem into a profit. The greatest asset we have is our mind, and if it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth in what seems like an instant. The narrative flow moves into the sacrifice of specialization. The poor dad believes in the gospel of the expert, urging Robert to specialize, to get a master's degree, and to become a highly paid cog in a large machine. But the rich dad offers a sensational counter-narrative, learn a little about a lot. He encourages Robert to work in different departments of his companies, not for the pay, but for the synergy of knowledge. Robert works in construction, in sales, and in shipping, learning the global mechanics of business. This is the archetype of the polymath entrepreneur. While the specialist becomes increasingly dependent on their employer, the generalist becomes increasingly independent. The lesson is work to learn, not to earn. Every job should be an apprenticeship for the ultimate goal of owning the system. By mastering sales and marketing, the most vital of all business skills, the seeker gains the power to influence and lead. The psychological depth of this stage is the rejection of the safety net. To be truly wealthy, one must be willing to be a student of the world rather than a master of a cubicle. As the seeker moves further, he encounters the obstacles to success. Even with financial literacy, many are stopped by 5 major hurdles: cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance, and, most importantly, the fear. The narrative depicts the cynic as the person who screams that the sky is falling every time a new opportunity arises. They are the critics of the arena, who never play the game but always know why others will fail. The rich dad teaches that cynics criticize, while winners analyze. This sensational shift in perspective allows the investor to see past the noise of the crowd. The psychological lesson is the duty of self-mastery. To grow rich, one must slay the internal dragon of doubt and the external siren of social approval. Wealth is a lonely road at first, but it is the only road that leads to the sanctuary of freedom. The narrative intensity builds as Robert begins to make his own investments, feeling the terrifying and exhilarating weight of his own decisions. He is no longer the student, he is the practitioner, testing the ancient laws of the rich dad in the unforgiving furnace of the modern market. The transition from the world of the apprentice to the world of the master begins in the furnace of internal conflict, where the seeker must finally decide which father's voice will dictate the rhythm of his life. We are overlooking the most important thing. The greatest obstacle to wealth is not a lack of capital, but the presence of deeply ingrained, subconscious habits that prioritize comfort over freedom. As Robert enters his adult years, the narrative becomes a sensational battle of will over tradition. He finds himself working a high-paying job at Xerox. Not because he needs the salary, but because he is terrified of people. He is the archetypal reluctant salesman, forcing himself to knock on doors and face the stinging lash of rejection day after day. This is the alchemical transformation of personality. Rich Dad taught that if you cannot sell, you cannot lead, and if you cannot lead, you can never own the system. The psychological lesson here is the transmutation of fear. By facing the cold no of the prospect, Robert is actually slaying the poor dad within himself, the part that craves the approval of others and the safety of a steady paycheck. As he masters the art of sales, Robert begins to apply the law of the 10th to his own life. But with a sensational, aggressive twist: pay yourself first. This is not a gentle suggestion, it is a spiritual command. Even when the taxman and the creditors are screaming at his door, he takes the first portion of his income and funnels it into his asset column. This creates a state of creative pressure. By being short on cash for his bills, his mind is forced to find new, innovative ways to generate income. This is the archetype of the innovator in the corner. The middle class pays everyone else first and hopes there is something left for them, which is why they remain stagnant. The rich create a vacuum of necessity that pulls wealth toward them. The analysis of this stage reveals the psychology of pressure. True growth happens when the cost of failure is high. By paying himself first, Robert is treating his future wealth as a non-negotiable reality, forcing his financial IQ to expand to meet the demands of his current debts. The narrative flow moves into the labyrinth of the market, where Robert learns to identify the deal. He discovers that most people are looking for a secure investment, which is often just another name for a low-return trap. The sensational realization is that money is created out of thin air through the power of the mind and the mastery of the contract. He begins to find distressed properties, using the power of OPM, other people's money, to acquire assets that pay for themselves. This is the archetype of the financial architect. He is no longer working for dollars, he is designing structures that capture the flow of money. The psychological depth of this stage is the elimination of the labor trap. He realizes that his time is a finite resource, but his systems are infinite. The lesson learned is the scalability of the asset. While the poor dad is trading his life hour by hour for a pittance, the rich dad is building a digital and physical army of assets that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without ever asking for a raise or a vacation. However, the journey is haunted by the ghost of arrogance. Robert encounters the sensational danger of thinking he knows more than the market. He learns that what you don't know is your greatest risk. Arrogance is the blindfold of the successful, leading them to ignore the very rules that made them rich. Rich Dad's wisdom intervenes with a sobering truth: when you are ignorant in a subject, start educating yourself or find an expert in that field. This leads to the archetype of the mastermind alliance. Robert learns to hire people who are smarter than he is, the best accountants, the best attorneys, the best brokers. He pays them well, realizing that a cheap professional is the most expensive mistake a man can make. The lesson is selective humility. To grow rich, one must be a king who listens to his counselors. Your wealth is protected not by your own hands, but by the expertise of the circle you build around you. The narrative intensifies as Robert experiences the victory of the small win. He doesn't start by trying to buy a skyscraper, he starts with a small 2-bedroom condo. This is the archetype of the seed. Most people fail because they wait for the perfect opportunity that never comes, or they try to hit a home run before they know how to hold the bat. The sensational power of the small win is that it builds the muscle of confidence. Each successful deal increases his financial IQ and prepares him for the next, larger challenge. The psychological analysis here is the compounding of competence. Wealth is a skill set that must be practiced. By starting small and dreaming big, the seeker avoids the paralysis of over-analysis. The lesson is motion over meditation. The world yields to those who act, and the market rewards those who have the courage to make a mistake and the intelligence to learn from it. The flow now carries us into the sanctuary of the business owner. Robert moves from being a S, self-employed, to a B, business owner, in the cash flow quadrant. He realizes that if his business requires his presence to function, he doesn't own a business, he owns a job. The sensational shift is towards systematization. He learns to create a manual for success, a set of rules and procedures that allow others to run the engine while he focuses on the next horizon. This is the archetype of the sovereign strategist. He is no longer in the trenches, he is on the mountaintop. The psychological lesson is the release of control. Most people are too afraid to let others handle their money or their business, which keeps them small. The rich understand that trust is a business asset. By delegating the mundane, they free their minds for the creative work of wealth creation. This is the moment when Robert truly begins to understand the rich dad's deepest secret. True wealth is the ability to live life on your own terms, without ever having to ask for permission. The narrative momentum builds as we enter the laboratory of the investor. Here, Robert learns the difference between investing for capital gains, gambling on the price going up, and investing for cash flow, buying the golden goose that lays the eggs. The sensational reality of the golden goose is that it provides passive income, the holy grail of the financial seeker. This is the archetype of the liberated soul. When your passive income from your asset column exceeds your monthly expenses, you are financially free. You have officially won the game. You are no longer a rat in the race, you are a human in the world. The narrative intensity reaches its peak as Robert reflects on the death of the poor dad, a man who worked hard, followed all the rules, and ended his life with nothing but regrets and debts. The rich dad, meanwhile, left a legacy of power and freedom. The psychological climax is the final choice. The seeker realizes that he is the author of his own balance sheet, and every dollar he spends is a vote for the dad he wants to become. The narrative reaches its final, absolute peak in the sanctuary of the sovereign mind, where the physical accumulation of property and gold is revealed to be merely the outward manifestation of an internal, psychological revolution. We are overlooking the most important thing. The rat race is not a trap set by the government or the banks, but a prison of the mind, maintained by the bars of a traditional education that teaches us how to be productive sheep rather than sovereign lions. As Robert reflects on the divergent paths of his two fathers, the sensational reality of their legacies becomes a mirror for the reader. The poor dad, even in his high-standing brilliance, was a financial slave because his sense of security was anchored in a paycheck he did not control. The rich dad was a free man because his security was anchored in his ability to create value out of the ether of opportunity. This is the archetype of the self-actualized capitalist, the individual who realizes that the greatest risk is not in taking a chance, but in playing it so safe that life passes you by without you ever having truly lived. And lies the ultimate meaning that the book intends to convey. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a call to financial individuation. Kiyosaki's core message is that the path to freedom requires a total death of the employee ego. You must stop seeking job security, which is a sensational illusion, and start seeking financial sovereignty. The book serves as a psychological map to the exit of the rat race, teaching that the asset column is the only true source of power in a capitalist world. It posits that wealth is a language, and if you do not speak it, you will always be a foreigner in your own life, subject to the whims of those who do. The lesson is one of internal responsibility. You cannot blame the economy, the boss, or the government for your lean purse. You must become the alchemist of your own balance sheet, turning your time into assets and your assets into freedom. The climax of this journey leads to a state of existential liberty. The seeker moves from the E and S quadrants, where they are the engine of their own income, to the B and I quadrants, where the systems and the money do the heavy lifting. This is the sensational return to humanity. When you no longer have to work for money, you are finally free to work for purpose. You can be a better parent, a more engaged citizen, and a more creative soul because the fear of survival has been extinguished. The final revelation is that the rich dad was not teaching Robert how to be greedy, he was teaching him how to be generous with his life. You cannot give what you do not have, and by achieving financial independence, you gain the ultimate gift, the power to choose your own path without a price tag attached. The journey ends not with a bank balance, but with a mindset that is immune to the fluctuations of the market. You realize that you can lose all your gold, but as long as you keep the rich dad perspective, you can build it all back again, faster and stronger than before. The ancient struggle between the two fathers is resolved within you. You honor the poor dad by using the education he valued to read the world. But you follow the rich dad by using that reading to own the world. You are the architect of your own sanctuary. And the bricks of that sanctuary are the assets you choose to build today. Your mind is your greatest asset. Or your greatest liability. Choose which one you want to invest in every single day.